everyone. Thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at.
They are leaving trails of tears and chaos.
Reports that many Border Patrol agents are planning on leaving Chicago as soon as this week.
We will never forget those who served.
As the city honors veterans, those who've served in the military, local veterans are bracing for more federal cuts. And warnings of an AI market bubble, some say, is set to burst. What it could mean for workers and the economy. First off tonight, the face of President Trump's ramped up immigration enforcement operations in Chicago is reportedly planning to leave the city as early as this week. Border Patrol Chief Greg Bavino, along with some of his agents, are expected to head to Charlotte, then continue on to New Orleans. The potential move comes just days after a federal judge issued a preliminary injunction blocking use of force against protesters and journalists unless, quote, objectively necessary to stop an immediate threat. The order also requires agents to warn protesters at least twice before deploying tear gas. The Trump administration is appealing the order. Governor J.B. Pritzker today reacted to reports that many agents could be leaving Chicago.
Whether it was the loss in the elections a week ago that's led to Donald Trump deciding to pull CBP out, or the fact that Greg Bavino is a snowflake on a day when you can see some snowflakes. Whatever it is, the people of Chicago have deserved better than having CBP and Greg Bavino in this city. But I would not say that we're now going to be free of these terrorized neighborhoods, because ICE and CBP probably will still be here, though they will have fewer people, and we'll have to continue to protect our neighbors and our friends and our families.
Despite the reports from multiple outlets, Homeland Security's Tricia McLaughlin says on social media, quote, "We aren't leaving Chicago," while also claiming there's been a drop in violent crime since Operation Midway Blitz began. We should, of course, note violent crime in Chicago had already been on the decline before the operation began. After what he calls the hardest days of his life, Republican Darren Bailey says he plans to remain in the race for Illinois governor after the death last month of his son, daughter-in-law, and 2 grandchildren.
Zach and Kelsey believed in an Illinois where families could build a future without being crushed by bad government and broken promises. They believe this state could do better. So do we.
In a 3-minute video posted on social media, Bailey explains he and his wife Cindy did a lot of praying and reflecting before arriving at their decision. Bailey is a farmer and former state lawmaker who says he also received encouragement from President Trump to, quote, keep fighting. And on this Veterans Day, local and state officials honored those who've served with a wreath laying at the Soldier Field Memorial Water Wall to honor fallen service members, along with a moment of silence. Among several events today, the city's annual Veterans Day commemoration ceremony included a keynote speech from the Illinois National Guard's Director of the Joint Staff, a general who came to the U.S. from Mexico at 6 years old and grew up in Little Village before going on to serve in uniform, including deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan.
That's where I learned that being an American is not where you were born. It's about what you're willing to give. Those early lessons shaped me. I can tell you that, because when I put on this uniform over the past 34 years, it hasn't been just to serve my country, but it's to give back to the city, to the people who gave everything to me.
Up next, local veterans and the ongoing battle for services. We'll hear from them right after this.
Made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Thousands of local veterans are feeling the impact of sweeping federal cuts and funding freezes. As the government shutdown continues, vets relying on food assistance are facing extra challenges. Some advocates say that they are worried about the future of veterans benefits as staffing cuts hit agencies like the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. And those pressures didn't go unnoticed at local gatherings to commemorate Veterans Day.
I no longer stand where I once did on the battlefield abroad, but I find myself on one still here at home. In the heart of a nation I love, fighting not with weapons, but with truth, with resolve, and with a renewed sense of purpose. And I invite you all to join me, not in fear, but in courage, not in despair, but in hope.
Joining us now with more are 36th Ward Alderman Gilbert Villegas, who represents part of the northwest side, like Belmont Cragen and Portage Park. He's also a former U.S. Marine. Nick Pajacek, an employee at the Jesse Brown VA Medical Center. He served in the U.S. Air Force. And Gabriel Villagomez, Veteran Services Director at Kennedy King College, also a former Marine. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we just heard about this new battlefield that veterans are having to navigate once leaving service. Nick Pajacek, you work with veterans who are struggling with mental health and substance abuse at Jesse Brown. What are some of the challenges that veterans are facing in getting health care?
I think in the context of substance use and mental health, one of the things that I want to point out is there's an executive order a couple months ago calling for the abolition of harm reduction services, as well as VA Secretary Doug Collins mentioning that homeless programs and suicide prevention programs are ineffective. Those are programs that I have benefited from greatly, harm reduction, suicide prevention, and homelessness. Those are all services that I received in my own recovery at the VA, and so to hear
and
those
harm reduction, sorry, just not to interrupt,
yeah.
but just so that people know what it is of course providing other drugs, Suboxone and such, to help come off of to help stabilize after the use of opioids. Accurate?
Yeah, medication-assisted treatment is a very
treatment.
common form of harm reduction, and so to hear these things under attack and potentially in the future getting them repealed is very scary, because there is no alternative service that can be provided in the community despite claims otherwise.
So lots of challenges then in getting the care that you need based on some moves that this administration has made. Gabriel, you're a Marine veteran, honorably discharged in 2013. Coming out of service, you went through your own sort of uncertain transition period. What was that like for you?
Yes, I was honorably discharged in 2013, and I do believe I do recall that for that first year, that period of uncertainty, right, I served my country. Now I'm joining society again. What is my future going to look like? Who can I rely on? I feel very fortunate to have relied on stumbled across really great mentors during that first year, and I think those mentors have stayed with me as an inspiration to become an advocate for veterans exiting service, connecting them with resources, with opportunities, even nowadays to help them find a pathway to employment through the power of partnerships. One of those would be the Utility Military Assistance Program with People's Gas, which has allowed us to place over 800 veterans since its inception 12 years ago, 300 plus alone during my tenure with city colleges, connecting them with high income paying jobs as utility workers. And I do want to extend gratitude to Alderman Villegas and the 36th Ward for helping for assisting and being a partner in this mission of disseminating that information, connecting veterans with jobs.
I imagine your own experience probably helps you have a better understanding of what veterans need that might be different from, a typical student at Kennedy King.
Yeah, most definitely. Not just in terms of applying and getting accepted into the college, but those supportive services to have somebody that understands, even not just veterans, but still service member in the Guard or in the National Reserves who might have their service obligations to their country. Well, now we have every city college is equipped with one of those advocates to make sure that their professors and the administration understands what they need to do and make sure that they're not penalized. They have all those supports that they need.
So according to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, there are over 500,000 vets in Illinois. In the state, there is 1 Veterans Benefits Administration regional office, 5 inpatient care sites, 36 outpatient sites, and 11 vet centers. Alderman Villegas, how would you describe the state of VA care locally?
You know, it's very frustrating that the men and women that serve this country are not afforded the opportunity for reliable health care, reliable jobs, reliable housing. And at the local level, we see that, and that's why we've put forward a Veteran Affairs Office that sets the tone and really collaborates with other entities, whether in the Cook County or at the federal government or the state government, to find out how we can bring these resources. Listen, when I was out to be discharged in '92, pre-internet, I'm looking through the paper for an opportunity, and similar to Gabriel, trying to realize what my purpose is. I went from full employment, a purpose, to unemployment, and trying to figure out what my future looked like. And so I always said that if I was ever in a position to effectuate change, which I am now, we'll put programs in place. And so at the city, we put programs in place despite the federal government not stepping up. So we took a look at increasing the affordable care, the affordable housing from 20%, 10% of that goes to veterans. We took a look at veterans' preference for positions. And also we created a veteran business enterprise program for those entrepreneurs, those veterans that want to be entrepreneurs. Again, we're not going to rely on the federal government. As local government, we're going to step up and make sure that the men and women that rose their right hand to defend this country are not forgotten.
Now, among some of the cuts that the VA has implemented, they say that they terminated union contracts, which we've covered here on this program some months ago. For most bargaining unit employees, they say that money has been redirected from wasteful union spending back to the veterans. They ended the DEI department, which they say is a $14 million savings for the department. Nick, disability pay and other VA benefits, though, weren't impacted by this current shutdown, but what has been the impact for veterans who rely on services like SNAP and Medicaid, which have been impacted?
It's been pretty significant, right? And I want to also, comment that I want to separate people who work at the VA from the administration themselves, because the people who provide services at the VA are outstanding, dedicated public servants, including myself, and are not representative of the administration at the local level, right? But people have not been able to file or check in on their school benefits with VBA closed. No new disability claims are able to be filed right now, which is extremely problematic, right, when people are ready to go in and get those services that they need. As well as we have a number of veterans who are coming in saying, I don't know where I'm gonna get my food from, right? And they don't have enough in their retirements or savings to cover that, right? So thankfully, community members are stepping up. And people are still asking, or when is the hammer gonna drop and when are my housing benefits gonna get pulled? Not saying that they will, but people are asking, people are scared.
Alderman Villegas, we've seen ICE raids aggressively ramping up all over the city. We've also seen them especially targeting Little Village. There have been some cases nationally of non-citizen veterans being arrested by federal agents. What do you say to the veterans who are worried that that could happen to them?
I'm really frustrated that the Republican congressmen are not actually being a check on this administration. We see that right now. The Republicans hold the president, the White House, they hold the Senate, and they hold Congress. And they should be really focused on putting forward a pathway to immigration to eliminate the fear and really stop throwing red meat to Trump's base. Reality is that they're in charge. Why don't you go ahead and put forward a pathway to citizenship? You want to secure the border? Let's have that discussion. But the reality is that they're in charge, and they need to make sure that they're putting forward a path. 11 million people that are your neighbors, they're not going anywhere. And so as the federal government needs to step up, these are folks that are contributing. And those veterans that have served, the fact that the Supreme Court has said, hey, anyone who looks like they may not belong here, ICE, you have the opportunity to arrest them. Again, it just goes against everything that America stands for.
Gabriel, several local veterans today, they organized to push back against the Trump administration in several veterans services today. Typically, when you all are serving in the military, that is not something that you can do. What do you make of veteran communities mobilizing in this way?
I believe that service extends beyond when you hang or you put away the uniform, and I am glad to see my fellow brothers and sisters in arms advocating for those who can't. And even within my scope of work, I want to follow that example, and many of my colleagues as well, by reminding our local community here in Chicago that veterans are more than a uniform and a gun, or a uniform and a rifle, but we're also community leaders, engaging with our local communities here in Little Village, here in Englewood, advocating for the rights of others, and integrating and collaborating together.
As you have, as you've done at this table right here tonight. Thanks to the three of you for joining us, and again for your service, Alderman Gilbert Villegas, Gabriel Villagomez, and Nick Pajacek. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brandis.
Up next, is the AI bubble about to burst, or is it overhyped? We dig in. While generative AI might be useful for gathering information quickly or just fun to see what your dog would look like as a human, it's also a technology that some are warning is on a bubble. A recent study from MIT shows 95% of firms who adopted generative AI did not profit, ringing the alarm for investors who've flocked to the technology. Joining us now with more are Stephen Keith Platt, director of the AI Business Consortium and Lab for Applied AI at Loyola University Chicago's School of Business. And via Zoom, we have Joel Shapiro, professor of data analytics at Northwestern University's School of Management, and Ben Zhao, Neubauer professor of computer science at the University of Chicago. Gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you for joining us. Ben, let's start with you, please. What is the state of the AI market in the United States, and why are some experts warning of an economic bubble?
Well, that's a big question. I mean, where is it? I think it's at a stage where, we're at the precipice of potentially very wide deployment in a lot of different modalities, a lot of different fields. But it's also at this junction where I think a lot of the practitioners who are, debating and thinking about deploying AI are actually still not quite familiar enough and knowledgeable enough about exactly what the technology can and cannot do. And so I think that's really the tire hitting the road, that type of moment where a lot of industries are trying things, and yet oftentimes in real time, they're finding out when things don't quite apply and when some of the marketing can turn out to be hype. And of course, that coupled with the tremendous amount of actual capital investment in the market and in financial markets, that's where you have potential risk for a real bubble bursting.
Joel, how might it be difficult to measure the return on investment for AI integration for companies?
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody wants some sort of measurable ROI. They want to know that what they're putting in, they're going to get something out and then some. Part of the problem is that when companies see AI as truly existential, that it really is essential for their survival, they're going to go forward with integrating it and figuring out how to be sort of an AI-driven company, and measuring the return on something that's all about survival gets really, really challenging. Sometimes when we think about using AI for small-scale initiatives, it's really easy to sort of figure out what's the benefit, what's the costs. Those are easier things to figure out. And I think the burden is on every company to sort of figure that out for themselves in those smaller scales. The challenge becomes when, as I said, it becomes truly existential and companies undergo these AI transformations saying, we got to do this, otherwise we're just simply not going to survive. And that's really hard to measure the benefit when you're talking about something as big as simply surviving. So it really is sort of all over the place depending on how the AI is being deployed.
Stephen Keith Platt, you've been working with large language models for nearly over a decade, and we've seen trends like AI before, like the dot-com bubble in the early 2000s. I think some of us called it dot-bomb times. We've seen a focus on data analytics, algorithms, the blockchain, and now AI, of course, has taken center stage. Can you clarify what technology is being referred to when we're talking about AI adoption?
Sure. Generally, when in the media, they typically refer to generative AI, ChatGPT, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what a lot of people miss is there's a lot of other applications that are very practical and profitable that have been going on for years. For example, your basic ML prediction algorithms that you could use for supply chain optimization, truck route optimization. These things have been around for years, long before GBT, et cetera, became popular. And the popular press doesn't focus on that. They focus on things like that MIT report, which is extremely misleading, by the way.
Say more about that, because as we've referenced, that MIT report shows that 95% of firms that adopted generative AI didn't profit. What's your concern with that report?
My concern is, one, it only focuses on Gen AI, and that's a segment of AI. Also, the metrics that they use are basically broad-scale adoption within an organization, and that's just not always the case. Joel mentioned, implementing some, solutions they're very practical and easy to execute. For example, looking up an employee's health records or stuff like that. These are not large-scale implementations. They're cost-effective. They have a lot of productivity enhancement benefits. That was not covered in an MIT study.
Ben Zhao, you've been an outspoken advocate for the regulation of AI. What are some of the guidelines that you think are necessary for the future as we further develop this technology?
Boy, again, a lot of answers there, but I think accountability and transparency are probably some of the first things that come to mind. Just like Joel and others have already said, there is in many cases this feeling that this is all existential, and companies feel like they must embrace it, full on, or else they're going to miss out. And so, that type of pressure has led, not just the AI developers, but also the application developers and society at large to really think about this as a must. And along the way, we've sort of pushed aside issues like copyright, consent, licensing. We've, thrown away issues of, right of publicity for personal images, right? When models actually take over and mimic your face, your body, your voice, and then can be used in all sorts of different applications. So, I would say perhaps, right now we're really focusing on transparency as something that, is probably the least controversial out of many, many different degrees of tension, but certainly accountability for, models that can, in many cases inflict unintended harm, put into the wrong hands. And someone has to be accountable for what these models end up doing once they're released into the wild, right?
Joel,
so I think these are really critical questions.
Joel, more and more companies are adopting AI into their workflow with hopes of reducing labor, most notably companies like Amazon, who lost roughly 14,000 jobs because of AI for AI-related reasons. What does all of this mean for workers in tech?
Yeah, so I think to the extent that there's some sort of correction, like we started talking about whether there's a bubble, and that's always a hard thing to know when you're in the middle of it, of course, right? It's easy in retrospect. If there's a correction, it's definitely going to hit in tech, it's going to hit in venture markets, but it's not going to end all of the innovation. And sort of what I think is almost heartening about this, I mean, job loss is bad, and it's sort of inevitable when you get these kinds of really exciting technologies where there is overinvestment. But what ends up happening, at least in past contexts like this, is those bubbles, if you will, tend to finance all of the infrastructure that later on tends to fuel the real growth. When Stephen talked about that MIT thing, part of the problem with the 95% is some of the benefit, that 95% failure rate, some of the benefit is still yet to come. The impact of AI in the workforce, it's going to be very uneven. It's going to replace some jobs, but ultimately it's going to change how everybody works. And that's very much still sort of to be determined. And there's going to be some messiness sort of as we get to whatever that equilibrium point is. We're going to get there, whether it's by a bubble or some sort of over investment, but we're going to get there soon enough.
So what you're saying, it's not replacing me just yet.
I didn't actually say
Stephen, 20 seconds left.
Sure.
In an AI landscape, do you think the existing laws, protections around intellectual property, privacy, other protections, are those sufficient enough to adapt to where this technology is heading?
I absolutely think so, and I think there's a lot of hype about the need to regulate this industry. There's plenty of laws that protect IP. There's plenty of laws that protect
IP, intellectual property.
Yeah, exactly. So the rush to regulate, I think, could have a negative impact on the growth of the industry.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that ethics, et cetera, shouldn't be addressed, and we shouldn't be mindful. But there's plenty of legal protections in place.
Lots to work out. Obviously, I'm gonna leave it to the three of you to take care of that. Stephen, Keith Platt, Joel Shapiro, and Ben Zhao. Thanks, everybody. And that is our show for this Tuesday night. Stay connected with our reporters and what they're working on by following us on Blue Sky at WTTW.com. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, wishing all a happy and healthy holiday season.